I'm Benji Samet, and
I'm Dan Hernandez, and we're the co-showrunners of Koala Man.
Excellent.
All right.
I can start if you don't want, or you can.
So I guess we'll just start at the beginning with a new property and the, let's call it, oversaturation of cartoons for adults. What is it you want to bring to the table? What is it you want people to take away from the show?
yeah, I mean, there's a lot that we're excited about with Koala Man. I mean, one, there's, Michael Cusack's distinct point of view, an Australian point of view. Like, yes, there's a lot of adult animation, but not a lot coming out of Australia, and not with this particular take on the superhero genre. And yeah, so that's what excited us to the character when we first heard about it, and why we wanted to help develop it into a show. Yeah.
It was a comic character, or it was the original character?
It was an original character of Michael's that he had made some shorts of in Australia, and yeah.
Then the three of us got together and figured out how to develop it into a longer format for Hulu, and it's been a dream working on it so far. It's been really awesome.
I really enjoyed it.
Yeah.
Thank you.
One thing that I noticed right off when I started watching the show was the universality of it. You know, like Americans don't think there are rednecks in Australia. So to open on those two was a great way to ground the show for audiences on this side of the pond. I also loved the subversion of creating a character with no powers and then giving him an actual monster to fight.
Yeah.
Is that going to be revisited throughout the show's run?
It will be.
Yeah, that's a huge part of the show.
It's sort of the secret sauce of the show. Is he does no powers. It's not even clear if he's really that good at being a superhero. But what he is brave. And what he does have is a code of conduct and a code of ethics that is
right. He's got
his
the,
own.
He's got the heart for it, and yeah. And the fun of the show is taking this guy, with no powers, and throwing him into actual superheroic type situations. And even though he's seemingly just focused on mundane things
Getting the bins out.
Yeah, getting the bins out and making sure the grass is just trimmed at the right level, but big supernatural monsters and things keep finding a way to him. And yeah.
By the end of the first season, I hope that people will not only have been laughing along the way, but also almost surprise themselves by saying, "Oh, did this actually turn into an amazing superhero story?" I didn't see that.
Do I love
coming.
Koala Man?
Do I love Koala Man? Am I extremely invested in what's going to happen to these people suddenly? And I think that that's another way that this show is a little bit differentiated from some of the other adult animation, is that there's a real beating heart at the center of this show, and this family relationship that, it's dad's going through something, and they're all kind of going through something, and as a unit, they really come together and sort of embody this sort of superheroic ethos that I think is sort of unexpected based on where we start and the fact that he has no powers and he's not in shape and he's not even that good at it, but he just doesn't quit, and there's certain bravery to that, I think.
What are some references in terms of creating the show? I feel like just one thing I noticed, and you can tell me if it's there or not. I feel like with some of the more philosophical conversations, it almost feels like a Richard Linklater. Especially with the wife being like, now that I have, she all of a sudden she's awakened that she has to think about her own shit. So it just seems. What were some influences in the past for some of the structure or the show or design or wherever you're at? If any.
Well, there were a lot, actually. I mean, I think that for all three of us, The Simpsons, the classic episodes of The Simpsons, was a really kind of a guiding light as far as how do you create a town? What do the people how are they going to react? I feel like part of the funniness of The Simpsons and South Park does this really well.
Yeah.
Is you can sort of anticipate how the people of South Park are going to react in a lot of circumstances, and we wanted Dapto to feel like a very lived-in, real place. Dapto is a real place.
Okay.
And that's actually where Michael is from, and so it was taking his real lived experience and sort of blowing it up into sort of a more surreal, one thing I like about Linklater's movies, which I hadn't directly thought of that, but I mean, even in thinking about it is one thing I'm always attracted to is characters who don't quit, even maybe when they should.
Yeah.
People who have dreams that they will not give up on, even when all of the world is saying that they ought to. And that emotionally, I think, informs a lot of Koala Man. And
Right. And I would also add that, like, I think something that I'm proud of with the show is both the show and each episode, we really try to make it about something.
Yeah.
And it's not just like, some shows are just mostly just like a joke delivery system, and they can be fun to watch. And but we wanted to do something a little different with this, where, we had things to say, and we wanted to sort of getting into his wife, or what this what does it actually mean for just a regular guy that's just suddenly announced to his family, I'm a superhero now, and how would that really affect the people in his community, and try to tell real emotional stories that still get hilarious and insane and broad, but keep that heart attached to it.
And speaking of Simpsons, I mean, he'd be your Homer character. I mean, I feel like there's a lot of Homer in that
I think there's a lot of Homer
Absolutely.
in the DNA, and I think one of the things that we ultimately like about Homer is he'll get misguided or he'll go down the wrong path, but in the end, he is there for the family, and he does love Marge, and that's just the truth of his existence. And I think it's similar for Kevin. He loves Dapto, he loves Vicky, he loves his kids, and that's his guiding principle. And he just feels like the world could be better than it is, and this Koala Man is sort of his attempt to try to impose some order on this chaos, which usually is sort of a fruitless endeavor, right? But in his mind, this is the way that he can do that. The other thing that I think is a little bit in the DNA of this show, at times, is something like Twin Peaks, where Dapto is we sort of say this show is set in Australia with quotation marks because it's sort of a surreal version of Australia where anything can happen, and there are monsters and there are aliens and there are all kinds of weird stuff is going on, but it is sort of recognizably Australia in the same way that Twin Peaks was recognizably Americana, but heightened and strange and surreal. And I think that was also, for me, a big kind of influence.
So you guys have been, have been writing partners through several different projects and for a long time. What's your guys' process like? Like, how do you sort of break things down between the two of you? Do you have a set way of doing it, or is it sort of different for every project?
At this point, we've been doing it together for so long. Like, I mean, over 15 years or something. And we I think we basically have a hive mind at this point, where we're so in sync. There's a sort of psychic connection where. It varies project to project. Sometimes we literally will sit down together and write something. Sometimes we'll split things off. Sometimes we'll send things back and forth. And it sort of depends on the project and depends on what stage of the project. But we've gotten to a point now where we don't even remember who wrote a line in a script.
And usually, I think maybe an underrated part of a long-term creative partnership is taste. Mm-hmm. I think that you can be very smart or you can be great writers independently, but if you don't have a similar taste, ultimately you will probably fracture in the end, because it's like, I want to be doing this and he wants to be doing that, and we can sort of find an artistic way to work together, but when you really are aligned in what you like, what turns you on, what feels like the important works of art, it's a lot easier to maintain a long-term partnership because you can sort of strive toward making your own version of that rather than people pulling in two different directions. And I think that Benji and I have that over. I hope so, anyway.
Can I dig into that for a second? How did you all meet? What were those things that brought you together?
We met in college, and we did a lot of theater and performance and writing things in college, and it's one of those things where we were working together creatively on theater, and it was just like you pretty quickly can know when you're like that in sync with someone.
Was there a certain moment you're just like, oh, we get each other? Was there a certain thing that happened that was like...
Yeah, there was, actually. We were both in a student-written play I was acting in the play, and Benji was tech directing the play, and it was an arduous process. There was a black box theater in college. They had put water in the theater. The water had like rotted the floorboards, and it was the day of the strike, which is where you take down the sets and all that stuff. And Benji and I had not spoken to each other, but we made eye contact, and we both knew intuitively we were not going to be helping. And so we found the same hiding space in the lighting booth, and we ordered ourselves a pizza, and we watched these other people deal with this algae infested water as we enjoyed not helping. So some people look down on us for that story, but if you're the right kind of person, you understand the instinct to self-preservation.
I did high school theater, so I know.
Yeah, peak college theater.
Last question. I just wanted to ask, so in the pilot, I love how it kind of oscillates between like ultra realistic comedy, like mundane comedy, and then like excessive, brutal, grotesque violence.
Yes.
And I was wondering how you guys found that line between the both of them, and if we can expect that from future episodes, that kind of interplay.
Absolutely. I mean, that interplay, that is like the magic of the show, I think. And you know, we spent years developing this show, and we've gone through many iterations, and finding that balance, I think, was key to it. You know, early drafts, we were, I think, a little too focused on the mundane stuff, and then some drafts we went a little too broad, and it was so much of the early development was finding that balance, and then once it clicked in for that pilot, that sort of was the guiding light for the rest of the season.
What was helpful was hooking into a big emotional idea in each episode that really in the pilot is this tall poppy syndrome. It is this guy doing his best to sort of be this superhero, and Vicky, going through what she's going through, and by really trying to be true to the emotion of those characters, we felt like it gave us a lot of license to go as insane as we wanted to, because we always knew that it would come back to that emotional place, and that's proved to be a good template for how the season functions, and that it goes to some crazy insane places, but if you look at each episode, there really is always a deep sort of classic human thing, feeling like you're not connected to your wife, feeling like your kids are growing up and don't want to hang out with you anymore, feeling all of these things are part and parcel of the DNA of the show, but because it's Koala Man and because it's Michael's crazy sensibility, we can have a massive Antarctic ancient flower monster, and that doesn't feel so weirdly it feels right. So that's sort of the ingredients to make Koala Man.